So good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to start this webinar. I welcome everybody on the behalf of Child Fund India. And today we are going to spend 1 hour discussing a very important and a very interesting issue, which is social and emotional aspects of learning and social and emotional development of children in present times, especially in context of when the schools are reopening. तो हम अपने आसपास आजकल देख रहे हैं कि हम 17 महीने के एक लंबे दौर के बाद स्कूल खुलने शुरू हुए हैं। बच्चे आपको स्कूलों पे बस्ते लेके स्कूलों पे में जाते हुए सड़कों पे फिर से नजर आ रहे हैं, जो कि एक बहुत ही प्लेजेंट साइट है सबके लिए। लेकिन जैसे जैसे हम स्कूल खोल रहे हैं और बच्चे स्कूल जा रहे हैं, और पिछले कई दिनों की चर्चाओं में हम ये देखते हैं, सोचते हैं, अगर रुक कर समझने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो पिछला 17-18 महीना का जो एक लंबा समय गुजरा है, वो बच्चों के लिए भी काफी स्ट्रेसफुल और ट्रॉमेटिक रहा है। बड़ों के लिए तो रहा ही है। So we have seen, and there has been a lot of research also which tells us that in the 17 months when the schools were closed down for the longest time ever, I think children have gone through a lot of stressful and traumatic experiences. And even Child Fund did a study in last November, and when we did the study in 10 states, we realized that children were feeling aggression. More than 60% of the children said that they were feeling angry, more agitated. They were missing their friends. Parents said, more than 50% of the parents said that they are experiencing negative behavioral patterns in their children. So what do we do in these situations? ये सोचना कि 17 महीने बाद स्कूल खुल गया तो बिल्कुल 17 महीने जैसे पहले जहां था वहां से हम खट करके वापस शुरू कर पाएंगे, आई थिंक ये भूल होगी। हमें ये सोचना जरूरी है, जानना जरूरी है कि बच्चों को हम जब सिखा रहे हैं, पढ़ा रहे हैं, तो वो पढ़ा क्यों रहे हैं, एजुकेशन कर क्यों रहे हैं, और क्या एजुकेशन सिर्फ एकेडमिक अचीवमेंट है या एजुकेशन का मतलब उनका ग्रोथ, डेवलपमेंट, एक अच्छे इंसान के रूप में होना भी जरूरी है, जहां वो अपनी भावनाओं को, अपनी संवेदनाओं को समझ सके, एक अच्छा जीवन जी सके और अपने बुरे समय में कोप करना सीखें, अपने स्ट्रेस को समझना सीखें और दूसरों के प्रति भी एम्पैथी दिखा सकें। तो ये आज की बात नहीं है, ये हमेशा के लिए जरूरी है, लेकिन आज के दौर में ये और बहुत जरूरी हो जाता है। और अब इसका एक टेक्निकल नाम भी है, जो बहुत पॉलिसीज में, न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी जो आई, नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी 2020 में जो लागू हुई, उसमें भी हमने सुना और इस पे काफी आजकल चर्चा है। एक शब्द आप सुन रहे होंगे, SEL, सोशल एंड इमोशनल लर्निंग। अब ये क्या है, क्यों जरूरी है, क्यों किया जाना चाहिए, क्यों ये बच्चों के पढ़ने लिखने की और सीखने के का एक बहुत जरूरी हिस्सा है, और अगर हम हिस्से को छोड़ देते हैं, इस हिस्से को अपने ध्यान से निकाल देते हैं, तो उसके क्या दूरगामी परिणाम होते हैं, क्या नुकसान होगा जो हमारी पीढ़ी उठाएगी। विशेषकर आज के दौर में इसको समझने के लिए और एक बार इस पे समझ बना के हम क्या कर सकते हैं, एज पेरेंट्स क्या कर सकते हैं, एज टीचर क्या कर सकते हैं, एज सिविल सोसाइटी क्या कर सकते हैं, इस पे समझ बनाने के लिए मुझे बहुत खुशी है कि आज हमारे पास एक बहुत ही एमिनेंट पैनल है जो इन चीजों को बहुत गहराई से समझते हैं और इस पे बहुत ही इन डेप्थ समझ आपको और हमारे साथ साझा करेंगे। तो मैं अपने सारे पैनलिस्ट का सबसे पहले बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करना चाहूंगी। हमारे साथ हैं प्रोफेसर नंदिनी चटर्जी, जो कि एक कॉग्निटिव न्यूरोसाइंटिस्ट हैं। फिर हमारे साथ हैं प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर समीर पारिक, जो कि एक साइकियाट्रिस्ट हैं। और फिर हमारे साथ हैं नम्रता, जो कि HCL फाउंडेशन में शिक्षा के काम को देख रही हैं देश भर में। मैं एक बात के लिए आप सबसे माफी मांगना चाहूंगी। प्रोफेसर पवन सुधीर NCERT से हमारे साथ इस पैनल में रहने वाली थी, लेकिन एक बहुत ही अर्जेंट काम के कारण उनको ट्रैवल करना पड़ा और इसलिए वो इस सेशन को ज्वाइन नहीं कर पाई। ये लास्ट मिनट ट्रैवल प्लान था, तो इसलिए वो नहीं ज्वाइन कर पाई। तो उनसे हम सुनना इस बार चूक जाएंगे, लेकिन कोशिश करेंगे कि अगली बार फिर से हम उनको अपनी बातचीत में जोड़ पाए। तो सबसे पहले लेट अस अंडरस्टैंड व्हेन वी से सोशल एंड इमोशनल लर्निंग, व्हाट इज दिस एंड इज इट एनीथिंग साइंटिफिक कि ये बस ऐसे ही हवा में की जाने वाली बात है? इसका कोई आधार है, और आधार है तो वो क्या आधार है, उसको पहले समझने के लिए I would request Dr. Nandini Chatterjee. Like I told you, she is a cognitive neuroscientist and is currently a senior project officer at UNESCO MGIEP, which is Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development in New Delhi, India. And she leads the Rethinking Learning program at MGIEP and focuses on building social and emotional skills for peace, global citizenship in children. She has led the development of EMC Square, a neuroscience-based framework that builds SEL competencies for empathy, mindfulness, compassion, and critical inquiry. She is focused on designing new interactive curricula using innovative digital pedagogies. So over to you, Professor Nandini. Look forward to listening from you.
Thank you so much, Ekta, and namaskar, everyone. I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity to share some of our work at MGIP and from the neurosciences on social and emotional learning. So one of the most amazing things I think that teachers, parents, in fact, everyone, even students realized is that schools are not first places for learning. They are first places for socializing. Okay. And that was one of the biggest reasons why when schools shut down, students were so upset. Of course, they missed learning in the classroom, but they missed socializing with their friends. Okay. And that we believe has been a big source of anxiety and stress for them. So why is socializing so important for us? Okay. And here is where recent research from the neurosciences has been very interesting and very revealing. So most of our education systems are designed right now to build a lot of information and so-called knowledge-based skills in our children. Okay. But what we find from research is that the greatest cause for happiness in our lives are relationships. रिश्ते हमारी खुशी का सबसे बड़ा आधार हैं. Okay. पर हम स्कूल में रिश्ते निभाना तो कभी नहीं सिखाते. Okay. रिश्ते निभाना तो हमको लगता है कि जिंदगी में इंसान सीख लेगा, घर में सीख लेगा, जिंदगी बिताते बिताते सीख लेगा. हम स्कूल में रीडिंग सिखाते हैं, नंबर प्रोसेसिंग सिखाते हैं, पर इमोशनल लिटरेसी नहीं सिखाते. और यहीं पे न्यूरोसाइंस ने काफी बढ़त की है. What we find is that the human brain is actually structured and to process social and emotional learning. And in fact, a large part of the human brain is actually the social brain. So I'm going to share one slide with you, okay, and share with you two important abilities that we are born with, okay. Even if they are not taught to us, we are born with these abilities. And once you see them, you will probably realize how important it is for us to nurture these abilities, okay. So give me a minute whilst I share my screen. And I hope you can see my screen. Okay. So what you're seeing on the right is a picture of the brain, and it's the brain looking like this. Suppose I was faced like this. That's what you're seeing of the brain. This front part is the frontal cortex, the frontal lobe, which does a lot of higher order thinking, language, also some amount of social learning. At the back of the brain is where you process vision, okay, through which you see the brain, the world. Above your ears is where you process auditory information. That is how you hear. And on top of your brain here is the parietal lobe, where you process sequencing information, temporal information, even math information. Now, the image that you see on the screen shows you a number of things, okay? I want you to not worry so much about the specific regions of the brain, but to focus on the fact that there are some regions which are coded in blue, okay, which are called the mentalizing network, a region of the brain called the mirror neuron system, okay, which is involved in processing empathy, and a reward network, which is activated every time you enjoy doing something or you feel rewarded. So why are mentalizing and another idea called theory of mind so important for us as human beings? So one important ability as human beings that we have, and which is something that the social brain does, is you make predictions about people's actions on the basis of their mental states. So let me give you a simple example. If somebody reaches out to eat an apple, okay, you can conclude that the person is probably hungry. उस इंसान ने बोला नहीं है कि मुझे भूख लगी है, okay? उस इंसान ने कुछ खाया है, पर क्योंकि आपको पता है कि जब आपको भूख लगती है तभी आप एप्पल खाने के लिए हाथ बढ़ाते हो, you are now able to use this ability to say कि जब मुझे भूख लगती है मैं एप्पल खाता हूं, वो बंदा भी एप्पल खा रहा है इसलिए उसको भूख लगी होगी, okay? So without that person telling you, you have been able to realize that mental state of the person, okay? So that's this important ability about theory of mind, okay? It's the same reason why when you see somebody eating an ice cream, your mouth begins to water, okay? It's that same reason. So this is the basis of a lot of what we do in everyday life. This ability to recognize this ability of mentalizing is also something that is associated with reward. Okay? Because कभी आप देखते हो कि किसी को किसी चीज की जरूरत है और आप वो चीज दे देते हो, तो वो इंसान के मुंह पे खुशी आती है और आप में भी वो रियलाइजेशन आता है कि मैंने कोई चीज फुलफिल की है, okay? तो वो रिवॉर्ड एक्टिवेट होता है. तो एक सोशल प्रोसेस के थ्रू एक इमोशनल रिवॉर्ड पाथवे एक्टिवेट हुआ, आपके ब्रेन में अच्छा लगा आपको. एक और चीज जो हम इस्तेमाल करते हैं फीलिंग या अच्छे लगने में, वो है मेंटलाइजिंग. लोगों की शक्ल या आवाज सुन के जब आप बता सकते हैं कि उनका इमोशनल स्टेट क्या है, okay? This is an important ability of mentalizing. It's really associated very strongly with emotions, okay? तो बच्चे जब स्कूल जाते हैं और आपस में मिलते हैं, तो कोई और जब खुश होता है तो अक्सर बच्चे भी खुश होते हैं, क्योंकि एक और चीज जो लोगों में होती है वो है इमोशनल कंटेजियन. हम एक दूसरे के साथ अपने इमोशनल स्टेट्स बिना एक्सप्लिसिटली बताए शेयर कर सकते हैं. इसी वजह से हम लोगों का दुख बांट सकते हैं, हम लोगों की खुशी भी बांट सकते हैं. तो बच्चे जब स्कूल जाते हैं तो अपने दोस्तों के साथ उनकी खुशी भी बांटते हैं. तो वो जो डेली इंटरैक्शन स्कूल में होता है, जो अब इस सिचुएशन की वजह से नहीं हो पा रहा है, ये डेप्रिवेशन बच्चों के लिए बहुत स्ट्रेसफुल था. ये एक चीज थी. दूसरी चीज है, इस सोशल ब्रेन के साथ आप समझ गए होंगे जरूर एक इमोशनल ब्रेन भी अटैच्ड है, क्योंकि हम भावनाओं की बात करने लग गए. अब रिसर्च बताता है कि जो हमारे इमोशनल स्टेट्स हैं वो खास नेटवर्क्स के थ्रू एक्टिवेट होते हैं। तो आपने जो कुछ एरियाज इससे पहले वाली स्लाइड में देखे थे, अब वो एरियाज कुछ और एरियाज के साथ कनेक्ट करते हैं ब्रेन में जो इमोशंस प्रोसेस करते हैं। इसमें एक चीज मैं आपका ध्यान ले जाऊंगी अमिगडला की तरफ। अमिगडला एक बहुत पुराना हिस्सा है हमारे ब्रेन का जो नेगेटिव इमोशंस प्रोसेस करता है। और उसके बगल में एक और एरिया है हिपोकैम्पस जो मेमोरीज के साथ एसोसिएटेड है। अब अमिगडला, हिपोकैम्पस और एक और रीजन है हाइपोथैलेमस, ये तीनों मिलके इमोशनल स्टेट्स कैरेक्टराइज करते हैं। तो बच्चों को जब कोई इंसिडेंट होता है जिसकी वजह से वो इमोशनल स्टेट एक्टिवेट होता है, वो याद भी रहता है क्योंकि हिपोकैम्पस भी पार्टिसिपेट कर रहा है। इसका मतलब ये है कि बच्चों को जब अच्छा लगा हो वो भी याद रहता है, जब बुरा लगा हो तब भी याद रहता है। पर ये अच्छी लगे वाली जो चीज है, अगर उस पे हम बच्चों को फोकस करवा पाए कि देखो अब तुम्हें अच्छा लग रहा है, सोचो तुम्हारी बॉडी में और तुम्हारे ब्रेन में कैसा लग रहा है। हमको जब अच्छा लगता है हम स्माइल करते हैं, हम दूसरों के प्रति हमारा प्यार बढ़ता है। पर जब हम नाराज होते हैं तब हमारी बॉडी भी बताती है, वी क्लेंच आवर फिस्ट्स, वी ग्रिट आवर टीथ और आवर फेस चेंजेस एक्सप्रेशन। नाउ इफ we can teach our children that you can anticipate or listen to your body telling you if you are getting stressed or anxious, then we can teach them that you might change your activity so that you can take away that feeling of stress or anxiety and convert it into a positive emotion. So why do we want to take children away from negative emotions? Because negative emotions lead to despair. Okay? जब हमारा ब्रेन नेगेटिव या गुस्सा या दुखी होता है, तब उसकी सारी एनर्जी उस इमोशन को प्रोसेस करने में चली जाती है, पढ़ने या सीखने के लिए अवेलेबल नहीं रहती। ओके, जरूरी है कि कोई और एक्टिविटी करके, जैसे कि 1 मिनट रुक जाओ और 10 गहरी सांसें ले लो, या कोई पॉजिटिव मेमोरी को एक्टिवेट कर लो। ऐसी चीजें अगर हम बच्चों को समझा सके और बता सके, तो जब उन्हें नेगेटिव इमोशनल स्टेट्स एक्सपीरियंस होते हैं, हम उन्हें उन इमोशनल स्टेट्स से डिस्ट्रैक्ट करके पॉजिटिव स्टेट्स में ला सकते हैं। पॉजिटिव स्टेट्स में बिकॉज द ब्रेन फील्स रिवॉर्डेड, इट इज मोर अवेलेबल टू लर्निंग। तब उसे सीखने की इच्छा रहती है। तो यही हमारी कोशिश है कि इस सोशल इमोशनल लर्निंग की जो समझ है, इसको हम अगर टीचर्स और पेरेंट्स के थ्रू के पास ये इंफॉर्मेशन ला पाए कि आपको अगर अपने बच्चों को ये सिखाना है कि रिश्तों को अहमियत देनी है, जब तक अच्छे रिश्ते नहीं बनेंगे अच्छी पढ़ाई नहीं हो पाएगी, आपका मन खुश नहीं रहेगा, और अगर आपका मन खुश नहीं रहेगा तो आप कुछ भी सीखेंगे वो आपके मन में बैठेगा नहीं। इसलिए सोशल इमोशनल लर्निंग का बहुत बड़ा रोल अब क्लासरूम लर्निंग में आ गया है, और खास करके टीचर्स के साथ, क्योंकि जैसे मैंने आगे पहले कहा था कि इमोशन इज कंटेजियस, सिमिलरली स्ट्रेस इज ऑल्सो कंटेजियस। सो जरूरी है कि टीचर्स भी जब क्लास में आए या माँ बाप भी जब बच्चों के साथ इंटरैक्ट करें, तब अपने आप को आराम से रखे, खुश रखे, काम रखे, क्योंकि बच्चे ये इमोशंस सेंस कर लेते हैं और आप अपना स्ट्रेस उन पर ट्रांसफर कर देते हैं। तो ये एक सामाजिक एक्टिविटी है जो हमें करनी है, ताकि हम एज अ सोसाइटी वी कैन बिगिन टू लिव more positively and happily. I'll pause there, Ekta. Maybe I took much more time than I was supposed to. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I mean, I think that all was useful and आगे हम जब क्वेश्चन आंसर सेशंस करेंगे तो उसमें और भी बातें निकल के आएंगी. पर आपकी जो सारी बातचीत है उससे जो मुझे टेक अवे लगा, जो सबसे बड़ा टेक अवे, देयर आर मेनी, बट सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट टेक अवे मुझे ये समझ में आया कि ब्रेन हमारा जो है वो इस तरह से वायर्ड है कि वो इमोशंस को प्रोसेस करने, दूसरे इंसानों से कनेक्ट होने में मदद करता है. और उसमें अगर हम नेगेटिव स्टेट में अगर है, नेगेटिव स्पेस में है ब्रेन, हमारा नेगेटिव स्पेस जो है वो ज्यादा एक्टिवेटेड अगर है, तो वो बच्चों से वो ताकत छीन लेता है कि वो सीखने में अपना ध्यान लगा पाए और समझने में अपना ध्यान लगा पाए. बिकॉज अदर कॉग्निटिव प्रोसेसेस, सीखना भी तो एक कॉग्निटिव प्रोसेस है, उसके लिए भी तो आपको ब्रेन चाहिए, आपको ब्रेन का इन्वॉल्वमेंट चाहिए, एनर्जी चाहिए. तो अगर वो नेगेटिव स्पेस में है और वहां वो उसकी सारी ताकत उसको प्रोसेस करने में लग रही है, तो सीखना संभव नहीं होगा, चाहे बच्चे कितना भी जूझे. तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा मुझे, मेरे लिए टेक अवे लगता है. अब इससे अगर हम आगे बात को जोड़ें तो ये समझ में आता है, आपने ये भी बताया कि ये संभव है कि हम बच्चों को सिखा पाए कि कब उनका ब्रेन नेगेटिव इमोशंस वाला स्पेस में है, और वहां से ये भी सिखा पाना संभव है कि वहां से कैसे निकल के वो पॉजिटिव इमोशन स्पेस में जाए. अब इसमें आज की तारीख में अगर हम देखें तो जो आसपास अपने हालात देख रहे हैं, 17 महीने से स्कूल्स बंद है, लॉकडाउन था, लॉकडाउन उठा, फिर लॉकडाउन वापस लगा, फर्स्ट वेव आई, सेकेंड वेव आई, कई तरह की बातें हवा में थी, लोगों के पास जा रही थी, कुछ सच थे, कुछ मिथ्स थे. तो इस सारे माहौल ने, मुझे लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं बच्चों को और थोड़ा सा नेगेटिव स्पेस में पुश किया होगा. उनके पास नेगेटिव, और आपने जैसे डॉक्टर नंदिनी ने कहा कि स्ट्रेस भी कंटेंजियस है, तो पेरेंट्स स्ट्रेस में थे, कई कारणों से थे, वो बच्चों तक पहुंचा होगा. तो हम क्या स्थिति में हमारे बच्चे हैं, क्या ट्रेंड्स इन दिनों में बच्चों के में देखे जा रहे हैं, और कैसे उनको एड्रेस किया जाए. क्या कई चीजें हैं कि जो आप प्रिवेंट कर सकते हैं, जो आप सिखा सकते हैं पहले से, पर कई बार डैमेज बहुत ज्यादा हो चुका होता है और वहां आपको रेफरल करने की या एक एक्सपर्ट से, प्रोफेशनल से मदद लेने की हो सकता है जरूरत महसूस हो. तो क्या ऐसे साइंस और सिम्टम्स हो सकते हैं जो पेरेंट्स ध्यान दें, टीचर्स ध्यान दें, और उनको कैसे एड्रेस करें, बच्चों तक कैसे वो मदद पहुंचाएं? उसके लिए हमारे अगले पैनलिस्ट के पास मैं जाना चाहूंगी, डॉक्टर समीर पारिक. डॉक्टर समीर पारिक is director in the Department of Mental Health and Behavioral Sciences of Fortis Healthcare. He is an eminent psychiatrist and he has done his graduation and post-graduation from Civil Hospital Ahmedabad. He is one of the leading academic experts in the field of mental health and conducts training programs and courses for doctors, psychologists, and allied specialties, and has initiated several awareness campaigns for the community. So I will like to hand it over to you, Dr. Sameer. क्या ट्रेंड्स हैं और कैसे पेरेंट्स और टीचर्स बच्चों को पढ़ सकते हैं, उनको मदद पहुंचा सकते हैं?
I don't look at life in terms of trends. मुझे लगता है कि वो सोशल मीडिया तक रहने दें सीमित, कि क्या ट्रेंड है, आधे घंटे ये ट्रेंड चला, 1 घंटा वो ट्रेंड चला. लाइफ इज a bit more deeper than what can be trends. And दूसरी बात ये है कि हम जनरलाइज नहीं कर सकते, right? There is a diversity, there is an inequality. इस साल की जो वर्ल्ड मेंटल हेल्थ थीम इज व्हाट? मेंटल हेल्थ इन एन अनइक्वल वर्ल्ड, because we recognize the inequality in the world. We have realized that we were able to take online education to hundreds and thousands of children, but we were unable to take education to more children because they did not have digital access, and that is the inequality across the world, and we need to understand that. We need to understand, for some children, going to a school also includes their most nutritious diet, which is a midday meal. So we need to be very cognizant about when we talk in terms of kya, and try and categorize things or generalize things, because there is no generalization that is possible. Second aspect, mental health as a concern is unrelated to COVID. कोविड के पहले भी नंबर्स उतने ही थे, कोविड के बाद भी नंबर्स उतने ही हैं. हमने थोड़ी बहुत बातचीत ज्यादा कर ली का ये मतलब नहीं है कि प्रॉब्लम ज्यादा बढ़ गई है. यूनिसेफ की रिपोर्ट जो भी कुछ दिन पहले आई है talks about 1 in 5 children and adolescents in the world having mental health issues. 10% of the global health burden is on mental health, neurology, substance abuse. Please understand this fact. So even pre-COVID, we had a mental health concern. Even post-COVID, we have. It continues to be the elephant that we don't notice. Just because we don't notice, that does not mean it doesn't exist. और उस mental health की prioritization कैसे school education में integrate करना, ये हमारे लिए बहुत important है. And yes, जिन बच्चों को digital education हम दे पाए, वहां पे ये सवाल जरूर आता है, like what Professor Chatterjee also said, that education तो आपने दे दी, फिर भी हम सबको लगाना कुछ मिसिंग था. मिसिंग क्या था? सब्जेक्ट वही थे, टीचर वही थे, होमवर्क वही था. ठीक है, ऑनलाइन हुआ. मिसिंग था आपका इमोशनल, सोशल, प्ले, फिजिकल, ये जो बाकी सारे स्टिमुलेशन हमको हमारी पर्सनालिटी को स्ट्रेंथ देते हैं, कॉम्पिटेंसी देते हैं, ups and downs of lives को डील करने में हेल्प करते हैं, those components. So what did we see? Most children I have come across to in the last few days are absolutely wanting to go back to school. Those who have gone to school couldn't sleep the night before because they were so excited that they were going to school. I think both senior citizens and school-age children have gone through a lot of stresses in COVID because of the kind of restrictions that were there, which were obviously important because we had to be having COVID appropriate behavior as a preventive approach to life. मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि इसको 2-3 एंगल से समझना जरूरी है. I believe in problem solving. I think we have years to analyze and we can keep analyzing things. And I can go on telling you the why. I think what we need to do is how to make a change. So I'll just jump into that straight away. Mental health curriculum needs to be integrated with school age education. Lots of countries are doing it. There is no reason why it cannot be integrated. When I say curriculum, और जो लोग सुन रहे हैं, curriculum का मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप ब्लैक बोर्ड पे पढ़ाना शुरू कर देंगे, उसके मार्क्स या उसके टेस्ट होगा. Curriculum is implementing evidence-based, structured approach so that over a decade that a child is in a school, you will be able to empower them with various aspects, understanding and importance of mental health, understanding what mental illness is, help-seeking behavior, resilience building and life skills education, looking at language and ending the stigma, creating a culture of well-being in the classroom so that children realize the importance of well-being. Obviously, well-being में social well-being, emotional well-being, self-well-being, वो सारा हिस्सा अपने आप आ जाता है. ये हमें करना जरूरी है. Coming to parents and teachers and all of us adults need to be a lot more aware and educated about mental health. कि हमें पता होना चाहिए A, how to give psychological first aid, B, when to reach out to somebody else. And when I say reach out to somebody else, expertization is not a solution in India. हमारे पास 500% shortage है experts की. हर एक problem का solution किसी expert के पास refer करके नहीं हो सकता है. हमें layers बनाने की जरूरत है. So one layer is teachers, one layer is parents, then there is a family physician, तब कहीं जाके expert आएंगे, and that's how we need to be working upon. So parents and teachers need to understand behavioral change, social interaction change, emotional change, change in functionality, change in well-being. ऐसे कोई भी signs आपको बच्चों में नजर आते हैं, आप बच्चों से बात करिए. Psychological first aid, look for the symptoms, listen to children and then link them to the solution. इस तरह से जो WHO की approach है उसे आप use करेंगे, implement करेंगे. Compassion, care, problem solving, non-judgmental, non-stereotypical conversation करेंगे. Obviously, teachers and parents need to be role models. Goes without saying. आप बोलेंगे कुछ और करेंगे कुछ तो किसी को it's not implementable. So you put all of this together and that's your solution, and I'll be happy to take questions later on. But we need to understand, in a country that has, like most of developing countries, ये भी report जो अभी आई थी उसमें आप इस बात को समझें, low and middle income countries में जो expert population ratio है वो as low as 2:1 lakh. हाई इनकम कंट्रीज में यही रेशियो 70:1 lakh. तो जब हमारे पास एक्सपर्ट की डेफिसिट है तो हमें कहां कैसे यूज करने के बारे में सोचना होगा, और हमें मल्टीपल लेयर्स बनाने हैं. Teachers with basic counseling skills, teachers and parents with psychological first aid, support from the NGO sector, policy that is towards overall personality of children, and absolute non-negotiable must of mental health curriculum in schools. Various helplines of support, all of that put together is the approach we need to have. और जब भी कभी एग्जाम्स, बोर्ड्स और मार्क्स की चर्चा आने वाली पीढ़ियां करें, वो याद रखें कि 2021 एक ऐसा साल था जिसमें बोर्ड एग्जाम नहीं हुए. जीवन वही है, सक्सेस फिर भी मिलेगा. जो बच्चे इस साल बोर्ड एग्जाम नहीं लिए हैं वो आगे चल के बड़े बड़े काम करेंगे, बहुत नाम करेंगे. तो अगर ये एग्जाम इतना लाइफ ऑल्टरिंग एक्सपीरियंस होता, then we would have had it. We didn't have it because when we valued it with life, we realized life was more important. So मेरा मैसेज है आपको कि choose actions that matter. जीवन में हमारी हर एक एक्शन का कोई रीजन होना चाहिए, कोई पर्पस होना चाहिए. I don't believe in ends matter, I believe in means matter. Value based approach to life. हम करेंगे, बच्चे सीखेंगे, शायद हम बच्चों से ज्यादा सीख पाएंगे. वैसे भी मुझे लगता है कि children are better stress managers than we are. उन्होंने कोविड को हमसे बेहतर हैंडल किया, all said and done. So yeah, please feel free.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sameer. That was really interesting. I think the takeaways that I was able to take, I mean, again, there were many, but the ones which I was able to take from what you shared are, first thing is that we do need focus on mental health and mental health curriculum in the schools. Then, like what you also said, is that parents and teachers and adults around children need to be compassionate towards children. We need to listen to them. We need to look out for signs of distress if they are showing any signs of distress, and we need to be responsive about if there are any signs, such signs that children are exhibiting. Then also we in general need to get away from this stress that we keep giving to our children about examinations. Because I think it was well put when you said that, like, if this year the board examinations didn't happen, nothing would change. But if child has an emotional scar or some statement that somebody has made, or a behavior which remains in the brain and the child carries through her life, that is going to be much more damaging. So I think that was also an important takeaway, that we need to understand that how we can, focus less on examinations and stress around that, and cherish our children more as human beings. Moving from there now, so if we know how brain works, we also know what are the needs of the children. So now if we want to translate that into some kind of action, Namrata, I would like to come to you. Namrata is a Deputy Manager Education and Communications at the HCL Foundation, and she has a very rich 9 years of experience, which is in field of education in development sector. So Namrata, I would like you to throw some light on what, as a civil society and corporates, we collectively can do so that psychosocial well-being of children is guarded when as they return to school, and what kind of collaborative efforts and interventions are needed to address this. So हम क्या करें, हम सब मिलके क्या करें कि हम अपने बच्चों का रिटर्न टू स्कूल जो है वो प्रोडक्टिव इफेक्टिव बना सकें और बच्चों के लिए बेहतर बना सकें. Over to you, Namrata.
Thank you, Ekta, and a very good evening to everybody who's joined. I think बहुत ही interesting perspective दिए हैं, Professor Chatterjee ne and Dr. Parekh ne. I think, that's really helped us understand how the brain functions, how it actually, develops those relationships, why it is important, where are the breakdowns really happening, and what are the areas that we need to support. I think, that the discussion has really highlighted that. Ekta ne mujhse bola that, I should talk about what to do. I'm not sure if I can give a straight answer, but maybe, I'll just try and cover ki hum kis perspective se as a corporate, speaking on behalf of a corporate and as a practitioner, क्या हमारा नजरिया होना चाहिए, किस पर्सपेक्टिव से हम इशू को देखें, एंड व्हाट आर द एरियाज जिसको हम फोकस कर सकें, एंड व्हाट आर द एरियाज दैट वी कैन इन्वेस्ट इन फर्दर स्ट्रेंथन. तो पहली एक बात आई थिंक विच सबकी प्रेजेंटेशंस दैट हैज रियली बीन हाइलाइटेड इज when we are talking about the well-being or the socio-emotional learning of a child, we cannot look at the child just in isolation. We need to take a very ecosystem perspective where we need to kind of understand, the entire ecosystem within which a child is operating, because it's not just उस बच्चे के लिए जो ब्रेकडाउन हुआ है वो काफी लेवल्स पे हुआ है, जो कनेक्शंस टूटे हैं. आई थिंक वो जो प्रोफेसर चैटर्जी भी कह रही थी अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन में दैट व्हाई सोशलाइजेशन इज इम्पोर्टेंट, एंड स्कूल इज नॉट द फर्स्ट प्लेस वेयर यू लर्न. सो आई थिंक दीज टू कॉन्सेप्ट्स दैट हैव रियली बिकम very very critical, especially during COVID. I think that's something that we need to understand. And when we talk about addressing this problem, I think it's not just about working with the child, but also about working, I think very, very important. How do you actually work with the parents and caregivers? What are the issues and challenges that have happened at that level? How do you actually, work with the teachers and caregivers, which is another point that Dr. Parekh was also highlighting, that, the entire ecosystem needs to be strengthened. So, आप वो कैसे करेंगे? What are some of the things? I mean, I'll just talk about some of the things that have worked for us. So before I come to what has worked for us, just to spend a little bit time, on जो I think mostly काफी लोगों ने cover भी किया है, but I think, एक जो school, especially when the school closures happened, बच्चों को like, the stress levels have gone up, of course, while, the fact that they couldn't socialize, वो खेल नहीं पा रहे थे, वो लोगों से मिल नहीं पा रहे थे, because that was just the reality of the situation. So when they had to just be locked up, there was a lot of anxiety levels went up, stressors kind of went up. I think also very important to understand that for the parents to actually get in touch with this entire situation, because ek to, I think it also led to a lot of loss in livelihood. The poverty situation actually increased quite a lot. And when I'm talking, and especially because Ekta has asked me about what can a corporate, what can we do as a CSR, what can we do as an NGO, I think it's also very important to understand, that our programming, while of course, we have to focus on the child, we need to take a holistic perspective where our engagement with the parents, our engagement with the teachers also needs to increase. And that's something that we have observed. अगर मैं अपनी HCL Foundation के बारे में भी बताऊं तो in the last 1.5 years, the engagement levels, like even if I say that हमारे programs में what really worked for us, though I think एक learning की बात जब हम कह रहे थे, तो अगर मैं कहूँ कि grade level कितना drop हुआ, how we could control it, I think was due to the presence of, that our first focus was ki how do we remain connected to these children. And I think that's another point that Dr. Parekh had also said, that, जो बच्चे हैं जिनके पास रिसोर्सेज हैं, जिनके पास एक्सेस टू रिसोर्सेज है, या फिर वो ऑनलाइन आके एंगेज कर सके, आई थिंक दे आर स्टिल इन अ बेटर पोजिशन बिकॉज उनके पेरेंट्स भी पढ़े लिखे हैं, शायद दे वर मोर इंटरेस्टेड, दे कुड गो एंड लाइक सीक हेल्प, दे कुड अंडरस्टैंड, दे कुड ब्रिंग दोज learnings back to the children. But for children who actually belong to very difficult circumstances, jahan parents were actually struggling to just find nutrition, food, livelihood उनकी इतनी impact हो चुकी थी, तो आई थिंक वहां पे ये भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हो गया था कि उनके साथ कैसे काम किया जाए. So in that, with that context in mind, just some of the things that I feel that worked for us. One was, and I think Dr. Parikh also had mentioned, we had set up this helpline, which was one of the first things कि at least अगर हमारे जो बच्चे हैं जिनके साथ हम टच में हैं, उनके पास at least, they should know somebody, a person who's known to them, they should be able to reach out. So creating that structure was very important, first of all. The second, I think, as a corporate, what a corporate really brings on table, I feel, is, a scientific approach to really, programming. And of course, we do come in with, indicators and what is the growth and what are the progress and trends. I don't know how, there was a need to really relook at everything, because, when you're actually mapping your performance and you say, ki itni increase ho rahi hai, somewhere I think one thing that I think corporates needed to sort of say that, it's okay that, there will be a drop in the learning levels. There will be a drop because बच्चे तो हम touch में ही नहीं है. But then, even if you're talking about, अगर हम education programs की बात करें, I think, for us to accept कि, हमारा शायद impact इस बार ये नहीं होगा कि कितने बच्चे इस level से इस level पे आए, but हमारा impact शायद ये होगा कि हम कितने बच्चों के साथ वो connection बना पाए, and who were we able to, like, किनको हम वो holistic growth opportunities दे पाए even when things were breaking down. So I think that was one of our things, and ये हमारे प्रोग्राम का हमेशा से अप्रोच रहा है that we look at the holistic development. एक हम term अपने, when we do our programming, we use it a lot, which is called integrated community development approach, especially when we are working with the urban slum communities. I think, it's, while बच्चों के पास कुछ services या programs enable करना, जिसमें कि I would say, and I'll talk a little bit more about it also, sports became very important, like, investing in sports programs, play for younger children, arts, crafts, so, there was a lot of focus on programs which actually took a very innovative, and I think that's where the civil society organizations come in, because I think some of the organizations actually, were very quick to sort of respond to the situation and come up with very innovative, and I think we are, as a corporate, and Ekta had also asked me about collaborations. I think, something that has always worked for us is partnerships, because agar aap, डिफरेंट टाइप के स्टेक होल्डर्स से एक डायलॉग करते हैं, तो अगर हम एनजीओज की बात करें या हम सरकार के साथ बात करते हैं, हम कम्युनिटीज के साथ भी बात करते हैं, तो जब डिफरेंट स्टेक होल्डर्स के साथ हमने भी बात करी, तो हमें ये समझ में आया कि कहीं ना कहीं एक इंटीग्रेटेड सेट ऑफ सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड करना बहुत जरूरी है, जहाँ पे हमारी लाइवलीहुड्स और स्किलिंग पोर्टफोलियो पे भी के थ्रू भी हमें बच्चों को देना है, बिकॉज जो उनके माता पिता थे उनको सपोर्ट करना, एंड देन उनकी कैपेसिटीज बिल्ड करना कि वो भी समझ पाए कि अभी मेरे बच्चे को जो ये स्ट्रेस है वो उससे नहीं डील कर पा रहा है. So, those were some of the things that we prioritize, and I think worked for us. The other thing, now that schools are reopening, I think there is a need to strengthen some of the processes that we feel already exist in the school systems, which we can strengthen, like, very simple things like, encourage children to speak about how they are feeling. So, छोटे बच्चों के साथ, स्पेशली जो हमारा 0 to 6 years के बच्चे हैं, आंगनवाड़ीज में जो हमारा काम होता है, या जो प्राइमरी स्कूल के बच्चों के साथ हम काम करते हैं, तो हम बहुत फोकस करते हैं फीलिंग्स चार्ट, how are you feeling, just put a smiley. So, those kind of approaches where we take, which just and then train the teachers to identify कि अगर एक बच्चा बार बार is showing some kind of, so how do you detect that and how do you address it? So I think that's one of the focus. हमारा एक और program चलता है, which I think and this is another thing which I will again and again say, resilience, a word which I think has emerged and has gained a lot of prominence in this time, creating not just resilient individuals and communities but also resilient structures. तो उसमें हमारा एक हैप्पी स्कूल प्रोग्राम चलता है, which is actually we are trying to kind of incorporate a mental health curriculum in the school system, which is not कि एक पेपर जैसे डॉक्टर पारिक भी कह रहे थे कि आओ और ब्लैक बोर्ड में लेके पढ़ो, but how do you create counselors, how do you create these professionals, how do you create a safe space within the school जहाँ पे बच्चा आके अपनी बात कर सके, how do you create these a group of peers. तो हमारा बड़ा सारा peer learning पे, creating safe spaces पे भी बहुत focus रहा है. When we talk about, तो ये तो हम जो स्कूल के बच्चे हैं, आंगनबाड़ियों के बच्चों के साथ काम करते हैं, a lot of our work is with children who are completely outside the system, जो ना स्कूल जा पा रहे हैं, because even before COVID actually happened, they had faced a lot of struggles. They had come out from situations of child labor. They so for them, first to just get them into the mainstream, like education क्या है, तो I think हमारा काम already उस पे चल रहा था. And I think and a huge part of it, which I think other speakers have also highlighted, was आप सिर्फ education या शिक्षा की बात नहीं कर सकते. We need to look at holistic development. So we need to look at the nutritional needs of a child. We need to look at the social emotional needs of a child. And so we need to have a multi-thematic approach as well. So even when we say, child is coming back into school, we shouldn't just approach it from a very education perspective कि अब जो ये 11% का loss हुआ था मेरी learning level में, उसको हमें address करना है. But I think we really need to say कि it's okay. So ये जो इतना % loss हुआ, it's fine. But क्या हमारा बच्चा ठीक है? क्या हमारे पास वो systems available हैं? So I think, another area where we are focusing a lot, definitely, training the parents, training the trainers, creating these counselors, creating safe spaces within the schools, creating these groups of peers who, can talk to each other, especially for the adolescent children, where they can talk to each other and then also somewhere become role models for their community. Another thing that I would really want to, I mean, I don't know, for us, it has been transformational, the power of sports and play. I think, that's something जो हमारे education, हम sports को as a part of education देखते हैं, because, we feel that it has a very transformative potential and has a huge role to play when we talk about holistic growth and development. So keeping that in mind, I think, sports programs में अभी invest करना and also making it a part of the school curriculum. And I think that's also a focus that is coming from, I think, Ekta, you had spoken about the NEP. I think that's a good direction that has actually come in, but how do you actually integrate that into the school? And so that teachers and the entire system actually starts talking about sports खेल रहा है तो बच्चा ऐसे bunk नहीं कर रहा है, वो उसकी भी क्या जरूरत है, उससे क्या transformation होता है. And there are wonderful stories that have actually come up. And yeah, we can go on and on talking about several things, and there are several programs, but I think these are just some of the ideas that have worked for us, and I would be happy to share some case studies also, how transformative these things have been. And I feel that if as a corporate we start investing in a very structured manner in these areas, that would definitely go a long way in sort of creating a safe and enabling environment when children come back to schools. So I think that with that, I would end and hand over to you, Ekta.
Thanks so much, Namrata. I think, yes, a lot of directions that you have given are really, really useful. And what I was able to pick up, again, I would not be able to pick up the whole thing. But the key things, I think, is like looking at things in a holistic way, and also talking about resilience, building the happy schools. And I also find and making sure that children have that safe space, I think, within the schools and also in community and their family life. The safe space is really something very important. You also spoke about creating counselors, as Dr. Parekh also spoke about the same thing. I think now that we have heard all our panelists, we can open the floor for the questions, and I will request everybody to type in their questions in the question and answer section. While people are typing their questions, I would like to also see that there is a common thread in the sense that, you know, when we were here listening to Professor Nandini, and when she was talking about how brain operates and how it is, you know, important to help children understand their emotions, what they're feeling, and how can we, and it can be done, you know, it is possible to bring children out, to help children understand their emotions and then cope with it and learn to deal with it. And then she was also talking about how stress is contagious. From there, when we heard Dr. Parekh, and he was also talking about, and I agree that mental health issues and challenges are not something that has suddenly emerged in the COVID time. It has been there. It is something which is most neglected, and but something where we need to really invest more, understand more, and you know, talk about more. So and from there to you, Namrata, when you said that you know, we need to help children build the resilience, and in everything, I mean, I could hear that we are saying that there is a connect. Parents play a role, teachers play a role, and that is very important, that how that is addressed. So so there are now the questions have started also coming up. So there is one set of questions which talks about how do we help teachers, even if we are saying mental health curriculum, or when we are saying social and emotional learning, how do we help teachers in building this in the classroom scenarios? One way, like what you were talking about, Namrata, is also giving importance to sports, to arts, and not treating it as a competition or something which is additional, but as a part of learning, because that gives us children a space to express. But in addition to that, if I could come to you, Professor Nandini, that how SEL, how we can interact with teachers and parents, how can we help teachers and parents in developing social and emotional skills in children?
So I'll be brief, and since I know I'm sure the other panelists have a lot to contribute. A couple of quick practices that a lot of teachers have found useful have been, one is if you are able to find interesting ways to do an emotion check in your classroom. Okay, you can start a day by saying, you know, this is how I'm feeling today, and would anybody else like to share? Okay, the very fact that a teacher makes available the notion that I can also experience different emotional states immediately begins to make children aware that I don't always have to be feeling on top of the world. There might be a day when I'm not feeling too good. Today I'm feeling bored. Today I'm feeling frustrated. Today I feel great. You know, it's possible to have these emotional states because it also helps you build an emotional vocabulary. Okay, that's one. Second is for teachers to try and think of finding times in the classroom when they can have children maybe do simple mindfulness activities which involve breathing, maybe doing coloring, something which causes them to pause a little bit and think within themselves. So to introspect, to look within if possible. We are often so busy teaching that we forget that there is a physical being behind. So forcing them to pause. And the third point, which I personally find very valuable and which is backed also by some good research, is encouraging the notion of doing one act of kindness every day. Okay, you do something for somebody. Sometimes it could be for yourself. Okay, because we know that an act of kindness activates the same reward pathways in your brain as eating a bar of chocolate. Okay, but it could just be sharing your tiffin box with somebody, or filling somebody's water bottle, or helping your grandmother cross the road, or whatever. It's a simple act of kindness, but it can bring a lot of joy into your life. And finally, if as a family or as a classroom, we can begin to find time to share gratitude. Okay, each of us has a lot to be grateful for in life, but we very often don't acknowledge it. So as a group and as a community, if we come and share gratitude, that also becomes a great source of joy and a positive emotional state, which can be rewarding for a child. So these can become practices which can happen in classrooms or at homes, and which are simple and easy to do. I hope these were helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nandini. That was really, really helpful. Dr. Parekh, there have been some questions around, I know you spoke a bit about how do we identify the signs of, how do parents identify the signs? And, but there are again a little more, insights if you also can give on how early signs of mental distress can be identified in children, because there are questions around that.
So you look at behavioral change. Behavioral change might be a child who's active becomes less active, becomes more aggressive, becomes withdrawn, or any behavioral change, right? Then social change, not talking to friends, not playing, sudden change of friends, the interaction nature with friends. Then mood related, happiness vis-a-vis feeling sad, irritable, angry. Then day-to-day life routine, sleep, appetite. Then academic would be like concentration, attention span, careless errors, acts of omission, commission, errors of omissions or commission. Then drastic change in performance, absenteeism, avoidance, some of those aspects. Then thoughts, sharing thoughts of not enjoying, not feeling, not being able to be involved with life, feeling a sense of distaste about life, sometimes talking about hopelessness. And then self, which is not feeling good about one's own self. Any of these, if you see as a pattern, let's say for about 2 weeks, in a consistent pattern, causing impairment of functionality of that child, overall impairment of functioning, then we need to approach the child. Start with, like I said, psychological first aid. See what it is. See if it can be handled at your level. Involve teacher, involve school counselor, so on and so forth. And that's the approach that we need to have.
I think that was really beautifully put. We really need to look out for changes in the behavioral patterns, and the psychological first aid is something which we should be first doing, and then we should be reaching out for further help. Nandini, Namrata, I think there is one question which is around how can the social and emotional learning, and I will personally add to it even the mental health curriculum if we are talking about, how that links with the new drafted and rolled out education policy. And so do you see any role there?
Of course, I mean, very valid question, and I think very, very critical also in these times. And I think I had briefly mentioned also, I think NEP, some of the wins of the NEP for me, I think one is definitely, how it is also focusing on vocational skills. It is focusing on an alternate route for children. It focuses on, having a sports curriculum. There are, I think these aspects definitely contribute immensely towards the socio-emotional learning aspect, where the learning or education is not just about the academic increase in the academic like learning where you just learn and take an exam, which was earlier the trend, but look at education from a more holistic perspective. So I think NEP gives a very, very good view of how can education be looked at more holistically. Agar ek bacha hai who's not able to, this is not, and I think another discussion that is also opened up is when you say mainstream education, what really does mainstream education mean? It by providing that alternate route ki agar आपको इस चीज से खुशी मिल रही है and this is what you feel will be something that makes you feel more fulfilled, and you can take that route. If you feel that a vocational skill or sports or these kind of, and I think NEP opens gives us inroads into these fields, and talks about something, learning as something beyond academics. So I think that definitely will give a good direction to inculcating socio-emotional learning within school spaces. And I think I think a lot of, I was just reading the comments also where some people have also mentioned that and we see this, and I think when we work on ground we see that there's a lot of pressure that actually comes on teachers. Every time we talk about a solution, we say we need to train our teachers and upskill them, and then they will be the medium through which we take something to a child. Of course it is very important, but then we need to also be empathetic and understand kya kya karegi teachers, like what exactly will be the role. And I feel that and these are discussions when we have on ground ki teachers, so we also need to understand कि अगर कोई पॉलिसी इस चीज का प्रोविजन कर रही है, देन हाउ डू वी ऑल्सो क्रिएट दोस अ सिस्टम अराउंड इट, कि अगर स्कूल में बात हो रहा है, इज देयर अ प्रोविजन फॉर अ स्पोर्ट्स टीचर, is that really happening on ground? So while policies are really good, but how is that implementation really happening, so that the implementation of it can also become successful on ground. एक teacher है, 3 school manage करिए, those things are realities, and I think a lot of people have brought up that point. And of course it becomes difficult because that then the teacher will also be working on the the administrative things, will also be engaging with the children, will also be doing everything. So I think while to actually implement it successfully, I think and that's also a role that we as corporates and NGOs have been doing also. How can we further strengthen or supplement what provisions the government has? And when we talk about rolling out a policy on ground, is there a supportive role that we can play to kind of fill these gaps? Can we sort of get into an agreement and say that if you want to really implement this on ground, this is how we are willing to support? So I think to realize this on ground, I mean while there is definitely a lot of real good in the policy, but when I talk about implementation, I feel there's a lot that can be done. And and then that's where I think that question of collaboration will come in. How can we collaborate with each other and create those supportive structures so that the benefit is actually felt on the ground level, and there's just no pressure just on one teacher who we completely empathize with.
Thanks so much, Namrata. That was really useful. There are many more questions, and our time is already up. There are questions around, do we have digital curriculums on SEL and things like that? And then like what you also picked up, there are questions of teachers. I mean, I think, and that it has been addressed in our discussions also. How much pressure can be put on a teacher, and then if that teacher gets stressed, that stress again gets communicated to the children. So I think we need to be mindful, and it is important to have collaborations. I'm not wanting to. I'm so enjoying this conversation, but because we've already overshot the time by 3 minutes, I think the questions we can still take, and we can, share with the panelists, and we can get back to people who have asked these questions. We'll try to do that. And I would like to thank each one of you. It was really brilliant. We could have heard more of each one of you. It was really interesting, and we are grateful for your contributions to this session. Thanks so much, and thanks to people who have attended it also. And I strongly believe we will all be able to create a better space for children, safe spaces for children, where children are cherished as human beings. Their education is seen as a holistic a thing, and not just, some kind of machines who are, can be filled in with some inputs to perform in future. So I hope we will be able to create that empathetic and compassionate society for the children everywhere. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.